So remote events allow us to send data from the server to the client or from the client to the server. I'm going to use the same diagram I had, so I could take data from the server and send it to the client and back again. And we use that as a remote event. So inside of replicated storage, I'm going to insert a remote event. Since remote events, can be called from the client and the server, they'll have to be replicated. So replicated storage is the best place to put remote events. It's pretty much the only place, actually. Inside of server script service, I'll go ahead and insert a script. And then inside of starter player scripts, I'll go ahead and insert my local script. We're going to have to locate replicated storage. So we're going to have to do local repS equals game get service replicated storage. I'm also going to need that on my local script, so I'm going to go ahead and copy paste that. Now I need to get the remote event from replicated storage. So I'll do local remote event equals repS wait for child remote event. That's the name of that event. Wait for child, just make sure that something exists before you try to reference it so that it doesn't end up nil. Yeah, that's about it for now. And I'll put that inside of the local script too. So instances have events. I went over that earlier, and they fire, and you can connect a function to them. A remote event is an event on its own that you can fire on demand. You can fire it whenever you tell it to. So it's kind of like playing baseball with somebody. So the server has a mitt, and so does the client. And the baseball that they're throwing is the data. So let's make the mitt for the server. So I'll do remote event dot on server event connect, put our function inside. The first parameter argument is the player that you're getting the data from. So that's the client that you're receiving from. And then everything else behind it is arguments that you define. I'll get to that in a second. And on the local script, I'm going to do remote event dot on client event connect function. And then inside of that function, parentheses would be whatever arguments you have coming from the server. Okay, so there's the mitts to catch the data. I want to print the player's name, and I'm going to print. I'm actually going to print received data from player.name, and then local script. I'll do print received data from server. All right, so now let's throw the baseball and have a mitt catch it. So I'm going to actually go to the local script. I'm going to do underneath this remote event fire server. And what this will do is this will fire to the server, and then this on server event will pick it up and it'll run this code inside the function. So when I hit play, there's a received data from Astral Orchid. On the server side, I'm going to handle this a bit differently. I'm going to do game.players.player added and connect. So this will call this function whenever a new player joins. So the first argument is the player that joined, and then as soon as they join, I want to do remote event. It'll fire client this time. And for the first argument of fire client, you have to put the client that you want to fire to, which is the player. Yeah, that has to be a player object. And so if I run this, we'll have our data received from the server. That little blue bar to the left of it indicates that that is client side, and that green bar next to this means it's server side. So our fire server and our fire clients are working correctly. As for sending data between the server and the client, you pretty much get to choose what you want to send. So let's say I wanted to send some data from the client to the server. Let's say just a, I don't know, local input equals and the string like E. So this isn't the actual input. This is just, a example. So remote event fire server, then the input. Now on the server side, where it's connecting to the event, I'll have to add an argument that'll be the same argument that I, is fire from the client. So on the server, we'll get the input from the client, and we'll also print the input as well. And so when I run this, it should print E. Yep, so it's receiving that data. And so, yeah, you can put as many arguments as you need to, as long as they correspond with each other, from the client and the server and vice versa. So, let's say I wanted to send some player data from the server to the client to, show on the client UI. So let's just make something called player data. We can actually make it a table. Let's put just data inside of that. Maybe the second index will be like 56 or something. So what I can do here is with my fire client, we'll do the player for the first argument. Then for the second argument, I'll put that player data. And so on our client side, whenever we receive it, we aren't going to receive that player argument because there's no need. We already know, who the player is on the client because there's only one local player for the client. So I can just put that player data, and then I'll do print player data. So since that's a table, I'll print the first index, and I'll print the second index too. And if I do that, we have successfully, received our data from the server, which is that data in 56 from that player data we defined on the server.